we are going to go over is how to use the call logs in the ShoreTel and Mitel environments to figure out what might be going on with any call quality issues that you guys are currently experiencing. If you have seen the logs before, they can seem a little daunting if you don't know what you're looking at. What we're going to go through today in this presentation is a few things. Some initial troubleshooting steps and questions that you'll want to ask your users as you get your information together for a possible call issue, where you can find the information that you require, which will range from the actual information in the logs to how you can gather the stuff for that particular call and grab the call GUID or the unique global identifier that we can use to find that call, and also some resources that'll make your life a lot easier. So what we're going to start with today is that initial troubleshooting. And these are a set of questions and or things to test if you aren't sure that'll be very, very beneficial to you if you are experiencing a call issue and need to figure out what might be going on. So just to go down the list here, this is what we also do at Inflow Communications. This is part of our initial triage when we get a complaint about any sort of call quality issue. We will ask these questions as well because they're very important for us to know. So you'll see here this first bullet point, this who, what, when, where, and why. And it's as simple as who's experiencing the issue, what are they experiencing, when did it start, where, which would be where's the location of the user, and also where in it, where are they getting calls from? Are they getting calls from other internal employees? Are they getting calls from an external source? Are they making those calls, or is it happening on both? And then the why is, of course, why we're here. The why would be filled in later once we have those first four questions. To go with those questions, things that are very important to try to get to the bottom of whatever could be happening is the problem consistent or is it intermittent? Is it something that you can duplicate the issue for 10 times out of 10? Is it such as maybe a specific number that somebody's trying to call that will not go through? Or is it something intermittent, like maybe out of 10 calls, maybe 2 or 3, you have an issue with some sort of garble in your audio or one-way audio, or some sort of issue like that? Are there multiple people affected, or is it just 1 or 2 users? Typically, with a call quality issue in a voice over IP system, if the issue is with the actual system or with the underlying parts that connect the system together, such as the network, you're gonna have more than 1 or 2 people affected by those problems. It is also more than likely going to be fairly consistent if that's the symptom that's presenting the issue for you. If it is just 1 or 2 users, it could be something a lot more simple than a problem with actual call quality. It might be something like the hardware they're using, such as their phone or their headset. So that's something that's important to consider. And once you have that information, a further step would be to see if there's any consistencies, like same site or the same number that keeps calling in, anything that can tie the problem together. So maybe you've got 5 or 6 people that are reporting that they're having issues with call quality, and you take a look and they're all at one of the branches that you operate. Well, the issue is likely isolated to that branch if nobody else has complained. So that's an important note there. Other things that you want to look at? Give me 1 second here. All right, there we go. We should be okay. Sorry about that. The next question to ask is, when did the problem start? Because this can kind of lead to maybe other things that occurred near the onset of the problem itself. Oftentimes, it could be traced back to something that was changed in the environment. Like maybe there was a network change and the gateway changed, or there was some new policies put in place. It could even be something such as group policy objects that were applied to the servers in the case of certain calls, like work group calls. There are a lot of things that can potentially cause call quality issues or call issues in general. So knowing when the problem began is important if you can get that information. And then the final two questions that you want to ask yourself from an administrative perspective: did we make any changes recently on the phone system? Specifically, did you make any changes to how the phone system is connecting? Anything in that underlying area, anything to the call routing, if it appears to be a routing issue, which is another thing that you can look at for these call issues in the logs. Anything that could be tied back. And if those changes occurred near when the problem started, there's a good chance that that might be why the issue is occurring. And then the last one would be, did we make any changes recently on the network? And the reason we asked that question is because the network is going to be what lets the system talk to each individual piece of equipment. And so if there are any changes on the network that could adversely affect that, like maybe there's a failing switch that's handling traffic for the voice system, or maybe you introduce some new ACLs and there was a port that got blocked, that could definitely be a contributing factor to your call issues. So those are very, very important things to know ahead of time. Moving on, there's some information that you're going to be required to have in order to be able to look up these things in the logs. So this is where that call GUID that you may have more than likely heard about through either our support or at one time or another trying to troubleshoot call issues. This is a unique identifier for a call and will allow you to grab every facet of that call in the logs and then actually analyze the logs themselves so you can see what's going on there. It will allow much better log parsing than simply having just the name, the phone number, and trying to narrow things down that way. And it's super easily accessible, especially if your users are using the client. So you'll see in the PowerPoint here, I've got a couple of sets of instructions, one for 14.2. So if you're on the 14.2 version of ShoreTel, in the call history tab on the communicator client, you would just find the call that had the issue. You would right click on that call, select properties, and then in that box, you'll see a link for support info. You'll click on that and another little box will pop up and 3 pieces of information will show up, one of which being the call GUID, which would be what we need for this. In Connect, it's even easier. If you're using the Connect client, you right click on the call in your history and you select copy call ID to clipboard, and you have the call GUID copied to your clipboard at that point, and then that would be what you would use to search for the call. If you don't have that information, what you're gonna need is the date, the time the call came in or went out, and the number that was called or was calling. That will allow you to search for that information and then actually find that GUID based on that information in the log, and then you can use that GUID to see the full picture. The other thing you'll want to know so that you can correlate it with log information is what occurred on the call. So description from the agent or user that had issues, and is it consistent? The best way to look for consistency here is if you have a couple call examples, see if the same issue is occurring. And then finally, access to get into the servers. And this would not just be the headquarters server. If you have any distributed voice servers in your environment, those servers can house these logs as well. It's a setup based on whatever server is managing the phone switch that user's phone is on. So if you have your main office in San Francisco and your headquarters server there, and you have a branch office in Seattle and a switch managed by that server and users in that office, and Seattle is reporting the problem, your logs that you're going to want to look at will actually be on the Seattle server, not on the San Francisco server. If you search for the call GUID in the San Francisco server, it will actually show up blank because it won't have any information there. So that's an important part to note for this, and a part that a lot of people do get stuck on. Just make sure you follow whatever switch the user is reporting from, find its managing server, and that's the server you want access to for the logs. Here's a couple things that will help you as we go through this log as well. So this is how you can read each individual line and what each individual line starts with. And you can tell what's happening on that particular line. So going down here, we'll start with CCE. That's going to be the first line you'll see in a GUID log. And this is the initiation of the call. This is when the call started. And this encompasses both sides, or what you would call legs of a call. So you will see many many lines that start with C as they encompass everything. And then you'll see many lines that start with L, which I'm going to get into here in just a second, which is for individual legs of a call or individual sides. So right after the CCE, you're going to start seeing some LCEs or leg creation events, and that's going to be 2 of them for the beginning of the call. There will be one from the internal user, and then the second one will be whatever that user is connecting to. So you will see either an external source, so an external number. You may see another internal employee. You could see a group, but you will see 2 of these, and you'll see 2 different parties there. LIE is a leg information event. So what this is going to do is tell you what is happening and why it's happening. So on each particular leg, so you may see a leg for the internal user. Let's say he got a call. You'll see a reason code, which will then, in parentheses, have a word next to it to describe what the reason is. More often than not, you'll see something like a reason 3 called, which means the user was called. So they are pretty straightforward. And you'll see this on both sides. And you'll see informational events for any sort of originating action like that. CSE is a call state event, and this ties together with the leg state event as well, the LSE. So you will see in many cases, a lot of these lines will be duplicated. And what this is going to tell you is where the call is. So you'll see things like ring back, meaning that the phones are being rang. You'll see established or far end answered, meaning that people are picking up the call. So you'll see all of those informational objects there. And this is how you can follow what happens on a call. So if somebody gets transferred, you'll see a call state event. If somebody hangs up the call, you'll actually see a call destroy event, but you'll see a call state event right before that. So you can see in this way where calls go through the logs. LDE and CDE are the destroy events, or basically the tear down of the call. So you'll see an LDE when one user hangs up the phone, and you'll see a CDE when the call itself is completely terminated. And then just like the state events, you'll see reason codes for this, which will tell you a indicator of what is actually occurring in that particular call and why it ended. There are some fairly normal reason codes, which we'll get into in a second. And then there's a few that are fairly common. We'll give you a good indicator of what's happening. And we'll let you take further action if it's needed. Finally, the GMST line, or the media state event, is going to give you packet stats for the call. So this is how we can check and see if there's something going on potentially on the network that could be causing any sort of issues. This will tell us our sent and received packets, any jitter buffer variances, and if there are any underruns or overruns. So any issues with the packets being received in a timely fashion, as the voice is a real-time protocol. So that's really important. And then also you'll see that reason, the RSN, and that'll be your reason for disconnect. And to show you here, just as a couple examples, normal, if you see a reason of 1 or reason normal, that means that your user on the Mitel side initiated the hangup. So if there was no issue with the hangup and you see that, then that's no cause for concern. If you are having issues with calls randomly disconnecting and you see that, there could be an issue with your system, and that's a good time to give this a call. Hang up, or reason 4, means the far side. So the far side is going to be whoever the external user is, or whoever didn't initiate the call in the case of a internal call, although that typically just shows as a reason 1 hang up or reason 1 normal anyway. So you'll see that there. And then there are other codes for errors. They all are associated with a particular number, but they always have a little word next to them to give you an idea of what occurred. The more common ones that we see that aren't in here are PSTN error, which, just like it sounds, means that we got something back from the far side trunk, meaning that there was an issue and that their side had to hang up the call. We also will every once in a while see timeout in the log there, which does typically indicate a network connectivity issue. means the phone was no longer able to communicate with the other endpoint at some point in time for a long enough period that it disconnected the call. So those are things that you can look out for. There are hundreds of them, but they are typically very straightforward, and that would be on a case-by-case basis. If you need some assistance looking at that and you see an odd reason code, definitely let us look at it so we can help you figure out what the issue might be. And I'm gonna pause just for 1 second here because we have one question in here, and I want to make sure everybody's good. We are using the Mitel or the MyCloud Connect product. Can we get logs using the cloud platform? In the case of call quality issues on the cloud platforms, you would want to go through Mitel TAC in order to get those accessed. So this webinar may not be beneficial for you. And I just want to make sure you knew that. I saw your question came in before we continued. So if there's anybody using the cloud product, this is good information if you want to move to a premise-based product, but it isn't something you'll be able to apply if you're using the cloud software. All right, I'm going to move on here. So this slide is about the media state information, so you know what you're looking at in the logs on that GMST line. So the GMST line is going to have a line similar to the one that says S1R378L0 and then the J, U, and O. So underneath, you'll see what each of these mean. S is sent packets from that leg of the call. So you'll have two of these lines, these GMSTs. One will be from A to B, and the other one will be from B to A. If it's an external call, you're going to see talking between the trunk switch and the phone. R is receive packets from that leg. Typically, S and R should be very close together. There will be variances because voice is UDP based, and some packets do get dropped from time to time. L is lost packets. As a general rule, you never want to see any lost packets. If you're seeing any lost packets in voice, it typically is going to come with call quality issues. And if you're seeing lost packets, that's definitely a time to take a look at the network and see what might be going on there. Jitter buffer adjustments are going to be the anytime that your system goes outside the jitter variance that the system can handle. So as an example, let's say your standard ping from one endpoint to another is 4 milliseconds. During the middle of that call, that ping spikes up to 300 milliseconds for a couple seconds, then comes back down. That's going to require jitter buffer adjustments on the Mitel side in order to keep that call going, and will definitely incur call quality issues. So as a general rule, you don't want to see any jitter buffer adjustments either. If you're doing a site-to-site communications over mediums like a VPN, it's often not always avoidable, and I would take them with a grain of salt in that case, unless you're getting a lot of call quality issues being brought into your ticketing system that you need to look at. And then underruns and overruns. So your standard buffer run and buffer overrun from a network standpoint will be shown on here as well. The most often thing that we see when we see bad calls is going to be underruns. And what this means is that's basically delayed packets to the phone. And what you'll hear if there's bad underruns is you will hear people lose words and just generally an unstable feeling to the call. That's the most common thing that we see when these kind of things come up. And then finally, before we actually dig into a log here, a couple of tools to help. The first one, which is very beneficial, is BrightMetrics. What BrightMetrics is it's a tool that we can use for reporting and visual call flow editing. The other thing it does, though, is with the reporting that's built into the system, the system is able to actually give you the call GUIDs that you're looking for. So instead of having to dig through a whole bunch of call history on one user's machine, if they can give you the information, you can actually pull it up and make that and bring that into view on your reports, and then you would be able to use that information to go ahead and find that call in the log. So you can definitely do that. The other thing that we recommend is a robust text editor that can filter by any one specific phrase. So in this particular case, we're looking at what can you do to get the call GUID and isolate that in the log, because the log is going to have several thousand lines of code, and show you all those lines in a chronological order. On this side, I'm a big fan of Notepad++. There's a number of tools that can be used for the same thing. And it's just simply to allow you to check things quickly with a call it. So with that in mind, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I've got a couple questions here to answer real quick. Why would I see multiple MST for the same call? That's going to be per call leg. So like I was saying before, when you have a call in progress, you're going to have two legs. You're going to have the caller, and you're going to have the called party. And so you're going to see a GMST line for both sides, just in case the issue is on one side but not the other. So in a lot of cases, what you might see is you might see one side sending and receiving packets just fine, and you might see the other side sending packets completely fine, but they're not receiving any, which is a classic example of one-way audio. So that's why there's two GMST lines, so you can see the way that those two work. Where would a jitter buffer adjustment be made? So jitter buffer adjustment is based on latency in the network. So that's going to be based on the overall network latency, and it's automatic when that threshold gets breached. There is a jitter buffer adjustment in call control options in ShoreTel if you do want to adjust the amount that you have. But the default, I want to say, is 300 milliseconds. I haven't seen that piece in quite a bit. I want to say it's 300 milliseconds now, though. And how long before logs are overwritten? This is actually a great question. The default for your logs is 7 days. We always highly recommend that that gets upped, which you can do in system parameters and then other. In your case, I'm pretty sure you're good, Kelly, because we would have done that a long time ago. But that's something that allows the logs to be retained for up to 30 days. But after 30 days, the NCC log and every other log that the system has does roll over and gets removed, and the next day will take over. So it's a per day log until you get to 100 megs, then it will roll to another log. But after 30 days, which is the maximum, the oldest log will be overwritten and removed. When looking at the MST, I see that the connection are both for the switch. Do you know why I would see this rather than an IP to the phone? You should see an IP to the phone as well as the IP to the switch if it's an external call. So that would be something that we'd want to look at and support with you. All right, and so what I'm going to do real quick is move on here, and I'm going to pop up BrightMetrics because I want you guys to see what I'm talking about for grabbing that call GUID. So I'm just popping that up now. And there we go. So this is the BrightMetrics on-demand reports menu. I'm going to use this to make it nice and easy to find a call and show you what I'm talking about. There's a couple good reasons to look at BrightMetrics when you have call issues or routing issues. So what I'm going to do just to grab an easy call is I'm just going to look at a trunk activity detail for the last 7 days. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on this line here. So when I click on any of these calls, and all of these calls are hyperlinked, you'll see that I can see the whole duration of the call and where it went visually. So you have an idea of what's going on with the call right then and there. And if I click on any of these lines, I can see a lot of the same info that the logs themselves are going to show me. So this is a really powerful tool, and in a lot of cases, you may even be able to see what the issue is with BrightMetrics without having even to dig into the logs, which is definitely a win because the logs, even with some know-how, will take you some time to work with. So here, as an example, I clicked on the top line to see the whole overall call, and I can see the calling party number. So this is the number that called in, their caller ID name, which apparently is just O. The port name. This will actually be the port of the trunk switch. So if you have if you have a PRI with 23 channels and this came in on that PRI on port 17, you'll actually see this here. In this case, this is an analog trunk, so it's got a name and they assign the phone number to the name. You can see the connect and disconnect time, the full duration in seconds, And then a couple of good pieces of information for issues with call drops. You can see the connect reason, which is almost always going to be originate. Sometimes it'll be transfer. And then the disconnect reason, which is a disconnect reason of hang up, which tells me that the person that called in hung up the phone. You can see the ring time and talk time. And then the most important piece is right at the bottom. This string right here that I have highlighted in blue is a call GUID. And you can use this to investigate further in the system in the logs themselves. Now, as far as the logs go, if you haven't seen them before, this would be in your Shoreline data directory. In that directory, there would be a logs folder. And then the log that you are looking for in particular is TMS NCC. That's going to have all of the log detail that we would be looking for. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pop over this log so you can see what it looks like. And you'll see this is in Notepad++, which is what we like to use here. And so this is a TMS NCC log. And I'm going to scroll through it real quick just so you can see what it looks like. It does look a little daunting. It's not as bad as it looks, especially once you get used to it. But you'll see as I scroll to the top here, there's a lot of different information. The good news is the majority of the information that's presented in this log is not necessarily anything that you're ever going to need to worry about when you are looking for a particular call. And this is in real time. So as calls come in, if you have multiple calls going at the same time, multiple legs are going to update. And because it's in a chronological order, that means all of your calls are in here jumbled together. So you can't just go down the line. Let me find a call here. Here we go. So you can see like here's a line that's got a call creation. You can't just go down the line and assume that they're all the same. If you go down even just a few lines here, you'll notice that this is a completely different call GUID from the one above, even though the one above is still going. So you want to make sure that you can filter that through. Now, regular Notepad can do this. You can go from line to line to line, but it's kind of hard to follow, especially if a call is large, because the call will have many different things going on. But the easiest way is if you can just pull it up and filter it together, which is what you can do in Notepad++. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a GUID pre-selected for this just to go through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Find All in Current Document. And you'll see that that popped up a whole bunch of different lines. And this is that call end to end from the log line by line without anything in the middle. So I can see the entire thing end to end without having to search through and without having to remember. This is really good, especially for work group calls or anything that has a lot of transfers and a lot of different legs, because you could potentially be looking at a couple pages of this alone. And in some cases, you might be looking across multiple servers because of the way the logs work. If a call gets transferred to another branch, for example, from my example before, you might see that. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this real quick and just go line by line and explain what's going on this call. So we're going to start at the top line here. So you can see at 11:54 and 37 seconds, we have a call creation event, and that's where the GUID gets created here. And it looks like the user at extension 2416 was called. So you can see that here. And just below that as well, this is the leg creation for that call from the internal side. So this corresponds to the user that is getting the call. I know that because on the right side where it says SIP here, you'll see that it says 2416 at and then the IP address. That's the extension of the user at the IP address of his phone. So that's how I can follow that and know that it's him. Just below that is a line that I didn't actually go over in my PowerPoint, but does exist. You'll only see it at the beginning of calls. It's not really a big deal. It's just a media creation. So this is the system saying, okay, this has audio, so it should have audio traffic. And then just below that, you see another call creation and leg creation event. This time, these are going to be the outside caller calling in. And so I can see the number that was dialed. And I can see that it came in on trunk group 6 which you can actually see there's a trick in Director. If you hover over the trunk group in 14.2, and unfortunately does not work in Connect, but in 14.2, if you hover over a particular trunk group on the trunk groups page, the little Internet Explorer tooltip at the bottom left will tell you the trunk ID. So if you aren't sure about the ID of the trunk that you're on or that you need to troubleshoot, you can actually use that trick to find out which trunk is which. And then also I can see that this came in on port 22. So trunk group 6, port 22 is where the call came in. Below that is our informational event for the internal user. So you can see that reason 3 called. So you can see that information here. And then there's the setup events that are going to occur. So we have a call setup event, which is an offering, which means that the phone call has been accepted on both sides. So it came in, our system said, okay, this is a valid call. It passed it to the user, and it is now offering it to the user in the form of ringing his phone. Below that is one for ringback, which corresponds to the other leg. So the other leg is currently getting ringback while the other user has not quite picked up the phone. Then under here, we have another call setup event for established. Established is going to mean that the call is currently in process. So this is where the setup starts occurring and the user's starting to pick up, and the informational events keep occurring here. So then we have an originate, which is an informational event. That's just saying that, hey, this call that is currently about to start originated from this number. And if I scroll to the right here, it'll show the contacts, which is the port in question the call came in on, and then the extension of the user. And then you have your leg setup event saying that the call is established on both sides. And you have a far end answered here as well, showing that both sides can see that they have a call they should accept and that there's a party on the other side that's there. So you can see all of these things here. This particular call has a couple extra things that you may see depending on your organization. If you do call recording, you may see a line that says NCC record call start. That just means your call recording is working. You will often see that with a leg creation that says bad value. That has to do with the way the call recording works. Unless you're having a call recording issue, I wouldn't worry about it. And then just under that, you're also going to see a leg informational event with a reason 41 of record. So this is a good indicator of how those reason codes work. They try to be really specific about what the issue is, so that way you can see what is going on the call, and you don't have to leverage support just to figure out what a reason code is. There are a few that are strange. For the most part, they are pretty consistently easy to follow. Then we do have another ringback here, and established and far end answered. That again is for the recording. And then you'll notice my timestamp changes because there hasn't been any call changes on this call. This is a pretty simple one. This was somebody picked up the call, they talked, and they hung up. If there was anything like transfers, people being put on hold, buttons being pressed on the dial pad, you would see all of that information in here. So you would see key presses up and down, you would see transfers, you would see where they transferred. You would also get a new GUID to follow for that, specific for the transfer, which we'll actually get into with some advanced troubleshooting in our next segment of this topic. And then you would also see basically any call manipulation here. Somebody got added to the call as a conference, you would see that all before the next lines here. The next lines, though, you'll see that there are 2 LDEs or leg destructions, and then a GMST line here. And what this is you've got your leg destructions. It's going to tell you what happened and why the system is tearing down the call. So you've got that reason 4, which is hang up. Reason 4 hang up means that the call on the far side of the Mitel system is where the call hung up. So that's just telling you who hung up the call. This can have a variety of things in here, though. And if there was an issue with the call that caused the call to drop, you will often see it in here. A lot of times we will see a reason that just says PSTN error, which does mean that the hardware that we're connected to on the other side sent a abort to the call and said, we're having an issue, we need to tear this call down because we can't support it. If you see something like that, At that point, it's time to call the carrier, get them on the line and take a look. Or if you're doing something like a tie line to another system, take a look at the far side to see what it's getting and why it could be potentially having an issue. Does not mean that the issue doesn't exist on the Mitel side, but it means that either there's an issue with the far side equipment or that the Mitel system is sending something that they don't support. In either case, it's time to talk to the carrier and see what might be going on. The other one that we see commonly is timeout here. Timeout literally means a network timeout. If you're seeing those on calls, there's something going on with network traffic that's causing a problem. So at that point, if you have the maintenance guide for the Mitel systems, I would look at the port usage guide, make sure all those ports are open for the entire mesh of the system, because every device has to talk to each other, and then move down that line and definitely get us involved so we can help you troubleshoot. Under this is your GMST lines. So I don't have the actual IPs in front of me for this particular call, but I wanted to just show you what they looked like here. This particular one actually had some jitter buffer adjustments, which I wanted to show you as well. But this is going to tell you a lot of information about the call. So it'll be the IPs involved. You should have two in these cases here. And in this particular case, you'll also see the codec used. What I can tell you from it saying ULAW is that's going to be G711, which most of you are going to use in your system. G711 is industry standard. It sounds better than G729, and if you have the bandwidth to use it, it's definitely the one you want to go with. If you're using G729, you would see that in here as well. You'll see the reason code again, so you'll see that reason 1, which is just normal for this particular line. And then the sent and received packets, and then the jitter, the underruns, and the overruns. So you can see here, there's a little bit of variance. So it sent 13,001 packets. It received 12,999 back. That's pretty standard. You'll often see these numbers skewed. In fact, if this number was even like 11,800 and this was 13,000, there might not actually be an issue, because that could be other side placing you on hold. That could be all sorts of things that could cause that. Now, one thing to note though is just the line being quiet does not stop packets from going through. It would just be packets without audio. So if you have a large discrepancy in sent and receive packets, you might have some sort of problem, especially if it's being accompanied with people saying that they're having issues with call quality. So this is the kind of stuff that you would look at here. And then going down the line here, you just have more of your leg destructions and the overall GMSTs. So like I said, these GMSTs are going to be between the two endpoints. If it's phone to phone, so an internal call, then you would see the two phone endpoints because they talk to each other directly. If you have an external phone call, then you're going to see your phone talking to the trunk switch that's handling those external trunks, and then you'll see the other leg where the trunk is talking back. In this particular case, this call went through a group, and because it went through that group, you have a couple of different GMSTs here. But that's the log in general. A couple more questions that you can ask your users as you go through the troubleshooting process is just a couple simple questions like, is it only external users or external calls that are having the problem? If it's only external calls, can we reproduce the problem internally? This is a great step for troubleshooting, especially for call quality issues, because if you can't do it internally and the issue just simply doesn't exist, unless it's something that you can't test internally, like it's one specific thing, which is very rare. You can do 99.9% of stuff internally just as well as you can externally. What you've essentially ruled out is you've ruled out the internal network in the phone system as the root source of the problem. And you can use that in combination with these logs to work with us and also work with any carriers that are in the intermediary there and be able to troubleshoot the problem easier. So as a good example, one of the things that I was talking about there with that PSTN error, if we're seeing that there, we can say, hey, we have a couple of call examples, and on this call example at this time for this call, which we can help them identify by providing the calling and called party numbers. We received a PSTN error at this particular time. Can you take a look in your logs and see what your device is reporting? That can stop things from going on days and potentially weeks, and maybe get a fix very quickly. So those things are very important. Let's see here. What are the numbers in parentheses before the event type? Let me pull up my, give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull up my call one more time. So I'm looking here. Are you talking about these here? These, as far as I know, are just internal diags that are used by the system. I wouldn't worry about them from a troubleshooting standpoint. They are, if used for anything, would be used by Mitel Engineering for very advanced problems. But as far as I know, that's just an identifier for the system and has nothing to do with anything in particular. And there's no documentation that notes it. So it's not something that I would worry about. All right, do we have any other questions? Looks like we may have a couple more coming in. Okay, and the 4,000 and 2,000 numbers, those are basically just the unique identifier for the actual call leg. So that's different from the actual call GUID, but it's the call leg themselves. And again, from a troubleshooting standpoint, I wouldn't worry about that too much because the call GUID is going to encompass all of that information. If it needs to be looked at on a leg specific case-by-case basis in the logs and looking for specific oddities there, that's going to be a point where we'll already be engaged with Mitel's technical support, likely moving up the ranks with a escalated ticket. So I wouldn't worry about it for your own personal troubleshooting. Can we get your deck for this presentation? I'm sure we can probably make that happen. This will also be recorded. So this will actually be on our YouTube channel and available on our website. And there will be a part 2. Are you going to show more with the CCOID in the next video? Yes. There's going to be a lot more advanced stuff, including how to actually trace through several servers to find full calls, and some more advanced things that you can find in the log. So yes, we're going to be doing a lot more in depth here. This was more to get your feet wet. When is part 2? I know part 2 is coming up very, very soon. I believe it's slated for next month. I don't have the official date for it in front of me, but I would be on the lookout for it. It will be very, very soon. It's not going to be several months from now. My guess would be it's going to be mid-August. All right, and I think that has shored up the rest of the questions here. If you do come up with any other questions, we can certainly help you out. Here's our contact information for Inflow Communications. If you need to connect it with Inflow for any resources, whether it be troubleshooting or just resources you need for your system, you can email us at support@inflowcommunications.com. We have a support portal at support.inflowcommunications.com where you can look at all of your open existing tickets, create new tickets, and you can also respond to your tickets from that location as well. And then you also can give us a call at 855-946-3569 or 855-9-INFLOW. We do have a 3-ring answer policy during business hours, so you won't be waiting on hold for 10 or 15 minutes for somebody. And when you do get somebody, which will be very quick, everybody here is very well versed in the system and will be able to help you out. If you want any more information on our Inflow support packages, you can email us at sales@inflowcommunications.com, or you can give us a call at 844-446-3666. 3569. And so again, on behalf of Inflow Communications, my name is Tom. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Do certainly hope we see you in our next installment of the call log troubleshooting and moving on further as we explore the product. Thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful day.